Welcome. My name is Amy Korsch-Williams. I'm the Director of Field Education here at the Mandel School and a member of the faculty. I'm so pleased that you could take the time to be here with us this afternoon and to participate in our training. So tell me, for those of you that are here, who is working with students in our online program? Okay, handful. And what about in our weekly program? Okay, and intensive weekend? Great. Okay. Well, we're really glad. Oh, and who is a task supervisor? Task supervisors. Wonderful. Okay. Well, again, we're thrilled to have you here, and I hope that you will find your time with us today valuable. I want to really extend our thanks as a field education department and as a school to all of you. It really takes community to support the needs of our students in field education, and without the many hours and contributions that all of you provide to our students and to our field education program, we would not be able to do this. So we are tremendously grateful for your contributions, and we hear from our students all the time about their experiences in field education and how grateful they are for all of you. So what you're doing really does make a big difference, and we are just tremendously grateful for everything that everyone does for our students. For those of you on the live stream, I just want to remind you that all of the handouts and the required post-test and evaluation are available on the field instructor link for our website. And it is required if you are on the live stream and would like Ohio Social Work CEUs, you need to use the chat function to make sure you sign in with your name and your email address so we have record of your attendance for the Social Work Board. For those of you that are here in the room, we'll do the post-test, no post-test for you, evaluation before you leave today. Your parking voucher is also included in your folder, and we will get you your CEU certificates, I believe, before you go today. If you're attending via live stream and want CEUs, we will make sure that after you complete your post-test that you get that via email within 2 weeks. Does anyone have any questions about any of the logistics before we start? There is plenty of food for those of you in the room, so please help yourself. The restrooms are out in the lobby. I really, really prefer to have good discussion, especially late on Friday afternoon, right after a long week. I don't want to put anyone to sleep. So please feel free to ask questions, to interrupt. You know, I again, like this time to be as meaningful as possible. So I did a slide with all of our field faculty's contact information on it, so you'll have it for reference. Our department has grown tremendously over the past couple of years. So there are many of us now working with students both on campus and online. So I wanted to make sure that you had all of our contact information. We are lucky enough to have some of our field faculty here in the room, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Who'd like to go first? I always do that. Who'd like to go first? And I stare right at the person. So, thanks, Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Brindo, Field Faculty.
I'm Beth Brindo, Field Faculty Advisor. Work with full-time and intensive weekend students. It's great to see you.
Hello, and I'm Angie Wooden, and I also work with full-time and intensive weekend students.
Hi, I'm Lori Painter, and I work with intensive weekend students.
Hi, I'm Nicole Parker, and I work with on-campus full-time students.
I'm Jeff Echek. I work with the online program.
Thank you. I'm Nancy Newer. I work with on-campus students.
Thank you. And again, we have our other field faculty who again are located in various parts of the country are on the live stream today. So hello everyone. And if you plan on attending or participating in our commencement this year, which you will be invited to if you'd like to come, if you have a student that's graduating, I'm happy to say that all of our online field education faculty are going to be here in Cleveland for that event. So I hope that we'll provide more details, and I hope that you'll be able to join us for the celebration. All right, so what we need to do today, it's kind of a tall order for the time that we have. I want to make sure that you have a general orientation to field education within the context of the larger school curriculum. Really talk about the importance of your role as educators, because that's really what you are as a part of the student's educational team. So we're going to talk a lot about that and supporting the professional development of our students. We want to give you some practical strategies, I hope, to help support the integration of theory and practice by our students into organizations. I mean, that's really what field education is about. Give you some strategies that will help to support the development of our students as professional social workers. We're going to talk about philosophy, forms, procedures, and manuals, which is everyone's favorite thing to talk about. And then I'm hoping that you're going to leave here feeling more informed and then also supported in your role with our students. Okay, so I want to begin by, and for the folks on the live stream, I'm just going to ask you to kind of reflect on your own. I'd like you to talk within your tables, just sort of set your mind back to when you were a student of social work, and really think about your experiences and take a few moments to recall some of the positive qualities of your field instructor. Okay, there may be a little of both, right? Positive and maybe some negative, but let's focus on the positive today and think about that individual and how their influence really impacted your experiences as a student or your growth into the profession. And think about how those experiences when you were a student, whether it was recently or some time ago, how does this translate into your role as a field instructor now? So how do your own experiences influence your work with students? And then think about what you're looking forward to or what you're already doing with students that you enjoy the most. So you can take maybe about 5 minutes or so to talk within your tables about that, and then we'll have someone come around with a mic and we'll do just a little bit of sharing. In thinking about your experiences as a student with your field instructor, what were some of the positive things that you recall that were most helpful to you? I don't want to have to do my staring thing. Just kidding. You must have hit, yeah.
Mine was, she had so much energy and she understood. She had so much energy and she understood what it was like. Physically, it was hard to keep up with her, literally just running. We were in a school environment, so we had to do a lot of running. But she was just very understandable, and I remember one of the first times she said to me, I was supposed to counsel one of the girls, and I said, I don't know how to do this. And she's like, yeah, you do. Get out there and do it, you know. So she, right. And I'll definitely take that away from, my field instruction.
Yeah. I think, knowing, and this can be a fine art, right? But knowing when to push and knowing when to pull back, because sometimes they're not ready, but sometimes they are and they don't realize it. So being able to kind of, move things along, that's a really, really important quality in any teacher. Who else has something fabulous that they recall? No? All right. Well, I'm sure you weren't students here then, right? Because all of our students have fabulous field instructors. So tell me, when you think about these experiences, how did your experiences with your field instructor and that positive nature of your relationship impact your growth as a student, as a professional? So we talked about being able to encourage and push the student to do more. I know for me, having that sort of mentoring relationship where I could be authentic, I think, especially for students who are working, who are in our intensive weekend program, who are in our online program, maybe working in the field site, it's very unique, right? Because as a professional, an employed professional, you're supposed to be competent. You're supposed to be competent in your job. That's why you're there. But when you're in the same site and you're also there as a student, it's this dual role. So really helping students to understand, in your job is one thing, but when you are in field education and when you are participating in these experiences, you're not expected to be competent all the time. You're expected to learn. But that can be, a tough transition. So I think that mentorship and being able to have those conversations is really, really important. When you think about your experiences, how does that help you with your work with your students now? Working with students is not always easy. It can be very challenging, rewarding, but challenging too. So how do you translate your experiences into your role with the students? Get the mic.
One of the things I think I've realized is how to protect the student. I feel like I was protected by my supervisor in my own internship and learning and how to think. But what I have found is that sometimes in an agency, they want to see the intern produce.
Yes.
Like they're a regular faculty person, or a regular faculty, a regular employee. And so I've really had to work, and I've appreciated that from my supervisor that I've had, who I call my mentor, really protecting and able to say to the agency, do you want this work turned in just to turn it in? Do you want it to be correct? Because otherwise I'm helping them learn an incorrect way, and I'm not comfortable doing that. So you need to, and I've put it back on the agency. What do you want? Because they're not here, they're here to learn. So you can't expect them to have the same productivity expectations, the same paperwork standards that we are having, because they can't, that's not their purpose. They're here to learn. And so that's just kind of been my stand firm and make them make the decision to protect, because I'm going to protect that student and I want them to learn well and not, I don't want to be a part of teaching the wrong thing.
Right. Yeah. I think that that's really important. I think, the pressures that many agencies are under, right? I mean, the fiscal climate is difficult. Organizations are under tremendous pressure. There's lots of needs and never enough resources. So really being able to preserve the educational value of the student's experience when there are many, many needs, students can be great contributors to organizations and can do a lot of good work. But, preserving the educational component of it can be tough. And I think the field instructor, at times, I know when I was, working in organizations and had students, you sort of get tossed in the middle of that at times. You have this pressure from, maybe from the organization to produce, and there are needs, but you also have this student who is looking to you for support and for guidance and is there as a learner. So how to reconcile that can be difficult. It's not easy. Anyone else have anything that they want to share in terms of how you translate your experiences as a student into your work now? Yeah.
What I really enjoyed, I would be part of interdisciplinary teams and working with nurses and medical staff. And so I really like to give my students that opportunity to shadow different disciplines to see how we all work together as a team and what the role of social work is with that team.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And again, I think I love that you said the role of social work, because it's so important. And we teach our students, you are not just a student, you are a social work student. So what does that mean to develop that identity as a social worker and how your role fits in, especially in interprofessional teams and navigating some of that? It's very, very critical to learning. What are you most looking forward to, or what do you appreciate most about your relationship with your students now? Hallie.
See, I'm trying to follow rules. I think it's really cool, maybe because of first-year students, to help them understand what they want their identity to be, or just to begin thinking about what they want their identity to be.
Yeah.
And since I'm an off-site instructor, maybe I have more freedom to do that because I get to see outside of the agency so easily.
Yeah.
So just helping them with the landscape and just imagining forward to their second year and to graduation, like that's just really exciting.
Yeah.
To help them hone their path.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. And again, I think, sometimes you don't realize it in the day-to-day, but when we talk with our students, and this comes back actually in our graduation surveys that we do, field education is what they talk about a lot. I mean, they really reflect back on their experiences in field very, very highly. So I think sometimes that can get lost, as you're going through the days, but your role just is so critical to the students, and they appreciate it very much. I like, when I was in an agency and had students, I always really appreciated, and this was sort of a double-edged sword as well. You kind of get sometimes in tunnel vision and you just do what you do, right? You go through the motions and you have your productivity and you have this and things you have to do. And, the students will always be like, well, why are you doing it that way? It's like, I don't know. I don't know. I've been doing this for so long. I don't know why I'm doing it this way. And so really, really causing me to think about what we were doing and why. And you know, I see that in the classroom too. They have so much excitement and energy, and I really feel inspired to be better. When they inspire me to be a better version of myself. And I think that is so helpful to me. But their energy is just, can be really contagious. And I think it's a great thing to be a part of. Well, thank you for the discussion. And hopefully you had some time to, get to know each other a little bit. Just a quick little bit about our degree formats. So we actually have, the 3 degree formats now. We have our online program, our intensive weekend format, and our on-campus format. So our online format has quickly become about the size of our other 2 degree formats combined. So our intensive weekend program has been designed, it's been around for many, many years to support the needs of working professionals. It's a wonderful program. And we have many students online that are also working professionals as well. And our on-campus students work too. Really, in terms of field education, the requirements are the same for the degree, no matter what format you're in. The students just approach their coursework and their field education requirements differently. So for students in our weekly program that are here, a couple days a week, they're in field about 3 days a week, so 20 to 24 hours for around 2 years. Our intensive weekend and our online students complete their field hours at the rate of about 10 to 12 per week, and that's to accommodate their employment, family, other responsibilities. So it just takes a bit longer to complete the degree than for students who are coming on a weekly basis. But the requirements are, again, all of the same for our degrees. It's just the approach. We also have a Master of Nonprofit Organizations, another master's degree program. We have many students who are interested in pursuing, already employed in nonprofit settings or interested in pursuing careers in nonprofit management, complete that degree. And we offer it as a dual degree option for students in our weekly format. This is a map. Anywhere you see in green, we have students. So because of our online program, and this was as of fall 2017, so it's probably changed even more since then. We just started a new semester. So as you can see, we have students everywhere, except for a few states, which are the gray states. We also have a high concentration of students in Ohio. Actually, the largest number of students we have are in Ohio. So some of them are very much local to this area, which is why we have some of you here in the room with us. They're just choosing to complete the degree in the online format instead of coming to campus. So our entire field education curriculum and our academic curriculum is based around 10 competencies. 9 of the competencies are designated by the Council on Social Work Education, which is our accrediting body. You actually have a handout in your packet that lists all of the competencies. The 10th competency, develop as a social work leader, is a signature competency that is unique to our school. We have 2 primary degree concentrations. We have a concentration in direct practice and then one in community practice. And then we have several specializations within those 2 concentrations. So all of these competencies are what guides our, again, curriculum, but the learning contracts. So you will see these over and over again in the learning contracts that you're using with the students. They are all centered around these 10 competencies and developing specific skills within each area. So again, the handout will provide you with some more information that's included in your packet, or for those of you online, it's included on the website. Our program offers a concurrent model of field education. So our students are always doing field work and academic work concurrently. Some programs will do blocks of field separate from academic coursework, but we feel very strongly that it is one of the best approaches to have students really continually being able to integrate what they're doing in field with what they're doing in the classroom. It's very important to us. So they, throughout the degree, are always doing field education while they're taking classes. Field education actually represents over 20% of our curriculum, so it's a really substantial component of what the students are doing. And that, it's really wonderful to see the students they bring so much back from what they're doing in the field into the classroom. I teach a practice course, and the first couple weeks, many of them are kind of getting into field and they don't have a lot to share. But as they get into the semester, they're able to really enrich our classroom discussion tremendously with what they're doing, the practice experiences that they have in the organizations, and it's fabulous. And then also, we are expecting them to translate what they are doing in the classroom back into the field setting to inform their own practice, but hopefully improve what's going on in the organization, whether it be their work with clients, or perhaps they're doing some more community assessment, or something on behalf of the organization. So it's really a sort of a mutual exchange of information, but it's really exciting to kind of see that light bulb start to go off with their learning, and them being able to say, okay, that concept that we talked about in class, I saw that in action with a client, or I got to practice this week and be able to talk about it, and then it really supports their learning. So it's a great thing to be a part of. The Council on Social Work Education in 2012 really formally recognized the importance of field education by designating it the signature pedagogy of social work education. So a signature pedagogy is basically an essential element of instruction in a profession. So really, field education is one of the primary ways that social workers become social workers, and the Council on Social Work Education really recognized that. So it's where students really begin to put their learning to work. We tell our students that it's the context in which, social work begins to become alive for them. Many of these slides, too, as well, I should mention, when we do orientation for our students, we use a lot of the same information. So, it's sort of concurrent in what we're telling you, we tell them the same thing. So much of it is the same. In terms of signature pedagogy, like for the medical profession, clinical rounds are their pedagogy, just to give you another example. Any questions about that? No, I'm going really fast, but I want to be mindful of our time. All right, so our field education vision is really predicated on 4 primary strategies. Research-informed practice and curriculum integration are just what I was talking about, that exchange of information between the classroom and field, and then vice versa. Supported student learning is something that we as a faculty take very seriously, but that's also what we rely on you for, to support our students in the field. We're not there on a day-to-day basis. You're the ones there with them, so that's why your role is so very critical. And then our partnerships. As I said before, we couldn't do any of this without you. So we really rely on your contributions and your partnerships to make our program a success. So field education is the context through which our students really begin to integrate the knowledge, skills, and values, cognitive and affective processes that are central to the social work profession. And again, they're starting to develop, as Hallie was saying, what does it mean to be a social worker? What do you want your path to look like as a social worker? And what does how does your role fit in an organization? So developing an identity as a professional social worker. They begin to really think about and learn and reflect practice that's consistent with social work values and ethics, which are very unique. We spend a lot of time talking about values and ethics, but it's with you in the agency setting that they're able to really critically think about these things and apply it in real time and in practice. And then to continually develop a professional knowledge base so they are ready and prepared to go out into professional practice. Students in our weekly format that come in with advanced standing, so these are students coming in with BSW degrees, they finish in 3 semesters. So it's really fast. It's really interesting to watch. They'll come in, in August for orientation, very much deer in the headlights, and they're able to participate in our commencement in May. They usually still have coursework to finish, but they participate in commencement, and it's really interesting to see these same students who have evolved so tremendously in such a short amount of time. It's just amazing. And you are a big part of that. This is one of my signature slides that I start orientation off with this with the students. Field education is the bridge between classroom and practice. So it's what's going to teach you the skills that you need to be professional. You're going to learn, you're going to work hard, and you're going to make mistakes, you're going to have successes, but this is what's going to carry you from, these theories that we're talking about in the classroom on a weekly basis to what this means in actual practice. So really what we want to keep in mind with field education is the continuous learning for the students. So we are expecting them to progressively be advancing their skills as social workers as they move along in the curriculum and as students. So we want to make sure that what they're doing in field, there needs to be an express educational purpose for all of their activities. And again, knowing the realities of agency practice and the demands that are on agencies of all kind, we know that organizations have their own priorities, and we understand that. But what we want to do is work with you and with the student to make the process beneficial to the organization, to you, and to the student as well. And that can be tough, but there really needs to be an educational learning component to pretty much everything that they're doing. So students are expected, as they move through the courses in field education, to progressively advance their learning and continually acquire new skills. So you'll have some students, perhaps, that come in and they're ready to do everything, right? Anybody working with or has worked with a student like that, they want to do everything, they're really excited, which is great. You don't want to dampen the excitement, but you also need to be realistic in what is a good progression of their learning and experiences. And then you may have other students that want to shadow forever, and that's not okay either. So helping them to have a reasonable plan to continue to move forward. And, we tell our students, we don't want you to be comfortable all the time. Comfort is not necessarily conducive to learning. We want them to be supported, but they may be anxious, they may be nervous, they may not feel ready, and sometimes they just need that push to say, you are ready, right? Ready or not, you're going to do it. So helping them to really think about how do we move forward with each course, because the time does go by incredibly quickly. And I tell them, this is one shot for many people. You go to graduate school and you don't get many opportunities like this to be a student, to take advantage of the time and resources that all of you and all of these organizations and in the school and the faculty are really committing to helping them have good experiences that are going to support, the foundation of their professional career. So taking advantage of what's in front of them. Our students complete over 1,000 hours of field education over the course of the degree. So our curriculum, both academic and field, is broken out into two different levels. So our generalist curriculum and then our specialized curriculum. So generalist is basically we used to call it foundation, and specialized is advanced. So students complete two different levels of field education and academic coursework. It's cleaner to explain in our 2-year program because they basically spend the first year in the generalist curriculum, the second year in the specialized curriculum. When we're talking about intensive weekend and online students, it becomes harder to explain it in time frames, but that's how it's designed. If a student comes in with advanced standing, they have the BSW degree and they're granted advanced standing, they complete 900 hours because essentially one field course is removed from their requirement. So they only spend 300 hours of field education in the generalist curriculum. So the patterns of enrollment for our students and how they approach their coursework and the field education courses are going to look very differently depending on what program format they're in. But essentially, after the very first field course, students spend 300 hours per field period in the course. So the difference being, for a student who is in our weekly program, they're going to complete those 300 hours in one semester. A student who is an online student or an intensive weekend student, they'll take 2 semesters to complete the same course. So that's sort of how it breaks down. Students are also expected to do professional development activities in each one of their field courses. So they do 6 hours per course. And we ask them to engage in these activities in addition to their field hours, to really start to kind of step out of the box and be exposed to lots of different things. So things maybe they typically would not, have access to in terms of agency training, things that they want to know more about, because it gives them a broad exposure to different areas of practice. For students who are here on campus, there's always lots and lots of different things going on in terms of professional development. But anything, generally anything that's approved for social work CEUs in Ohio or anywhere else in the country is a good example of a professional development activity. It just needs to be tied to the social work profession, and that's very much self-directed by the students. So, sometimes I think they get into this thinking of it's just sort of another thing to do. But I think we encourage them to really look at it as an opportunity to learn about different areas of practice and different things that they might not normally expose themselves to. So if you hear them talking about PD hours and I need PD hours, that's what that is. All right. So the Council on Social Work Education in 2015 really recognized a holistic view of professional competence. So when we're looking at competence in social work students, we are looking not only at knowledge, but the skills, values, and thinking and feeling processes that are necessary for professional social work. And these knowledge, skills, values, and thinking and feeling processes, really much of this occurs in field, right? Because we, of course, are encouraging and teaching students to think critically, exercise judgment, and manage their reactions and emotions in the classroom. But a lot of this comes out in field. They're exposed to lots of different things. And so a lot of that teaching really falls in the realm of field education versus in the classroom. So that's why, one of the many reasons why field is so important. Marian Bogo, who is one of the premier writers and researchers in the area of field education, she's with the University of Toronto. If you have some extra time on your hands and were not able to be here in June when she was here, the recording of her presentation along with the field instructor panel that we did is posted on our website. I would really encourage you to take a look at it because it was just a fabulous, fabulous presentation. But she really looked at holistic competence in her model as a combination of the skills that they're learning, their ability to self-regulate, so emotions, reflections, their level of self-awareness, their judgment, how they're exercising assumptions, critical thinking, their decision-making. I'm sure you can think of many, many things in field, right, where there's opportunities to work on this. And I'm sure you know that a student can do very well in the classroom, can write excellent papers, but perhaps when they try and apply those skills and those concepts in front of people in real practice situations, it becomes more challenging. And those soft skills and those practice skills are really important, but students. Some students develop skills very quickly and easily. Other students take more time and need more practice. And then again, the knowledge, so what we're teaching in the classroom and then what's coming back from field education. So that all goes into the competence and the practice behaviors that we're requiring our students to develop during their time with us. So when you're looking at the competencies, there are specific practice behaviors, this is CSWE language, that students have to address both at the generalist, so that foundation level, and then at the specialized, the advanced level. And this is all the foundation of those learning contracts, okay? So goals are developed around these areas of competency and the practice behaviors. So we really are asking you to, become familiar with the competencies, with the learning contract. I know we are always asking our students to engage the field instructor in a discussion about their learning contract early on, but we also know that doesn't always happen. So really, taking a look at the expectations, sitting with them, looking at the learning contract and understanding what they need to be working on and helping them translate some of that information into what can be done in your particular setting. And we are also here as a resource. Our field faculty are here as a wonderful resource. If you're just not sure how to do that, that's what we're here for. We ask our agencies to provide students both with macro and micro practice opportunities, and students really need to have exposure to practice in every area. Every one of those competencies needs to be addressed in each field period. So that's something very important, so they can develop that broad general foundation for practice that's so important. And they also need to be exposed at all stages of the social work process. Does anyone remember stages of the social work process? When you see it, you'll be like, oh, that's a social work process. So engagement, assessment, intervention, and evaluation, right? So students need to have opportunities in each of those areas, and they also need to have these opportunities at all of these levels of intervention, okay? So from individuals up through communities. And this can become challenging, but what we're hoping to leave you with is that, again, we're here as a faculty to help you think about how can I make this work in my organization. You know, if I work for a nonprofit that does basically counseling, case management, how do I provide students opportunities to engage with communities? You know, so we're going to give you some examples, hopefully that will be helpful to you to do that. And then again, always remembering that the field faculty advisor that's assigned to your student can be a wonderful resource in helping, whether it's during the field conference or at any other point, to interpret how to actualize some of this in the learning contract. When we did, in 2016, we did a survey of all of our field education partners. And many of the responding agencies were more direct practice sort of organizations, both locally and in other areas of the country. But what we found was, we asked some questions about the types of experiences that students were having. So we found that students were really pretty consistently getting experiences with individuals, families, but you see how it starts to dip down there when we're talking about groups, organizations, and communities. The level of exposure goes down. And we really want to be here as a resource for you so that all students can have practice experience in all of these areas, because it's very important. And I'm sure that if you surveyed organizations that tend to do more community development, community practice, macro policy kind of work, the scale might slide the other way. It's just our respondents happen to be more direct practice sort of organizations. So thinking about how perhaps we can work to even out the experiences that the students have during their time with you. Oops. So the learning contract and the evaluation is really the primary planning assessment tool. It's our biggest resource in field education. Again, it always addresses all of those areas of competency. All of our learning contracts are assigned in the IPT system. If you need support with IPT, please always feel free to reach out to your student's field faculty advisor. I think once you get in, you have your password. It's pretty user-friendly, I hope. We also, this semester, have launched all of our students' field education timesheets are now also loaded into the IPT system. So before you were signing those on paper, that will all be e-signed in IPT now. I'm hoping that that's going to make life easier for you and for the students, because if you're, they won't be having to chase your signatures, I hope. But we piloted that in the fall with a small group of students that were graduating, and then we launched it for all of our students this spring. So with the launch of any new thing, there's always some bugs. So the students should have the documents now. Again, we're hoping that that's going to be a better system. But if you're having any trouble, the student knows they can contact the field faculty. You also are always more than welcome to let us know. what we tell the students about the learning contract, because again, I think at times they think of it as this is one more assignment, this is one more document that I have to fill out. And what I tell them is it is the roadmap to your experience. So how are you going to know where you're going if you don't really take the time to think about and plan? Again, being a student is a unique opportunity. So really think about what are your goals, what are your learning goals as a student, and how can we help you achieve those during your time in the placement. So having them think about that and sort of move away from just this is one more document I have to fill out, but really thinking about how this document can help me measure my goals or identify my goals and measure my progress over time. There are two, there's a generalist learning contract and there's a specialized learning contract. And the difference in the documents are those required practice behaviors that are different for students at different levels. So that's the primary difference in the documents. Any questions about learning contracts, IPT? Is everyone pretty much in IPT at this point? Yeah, you've been using it? Okay, all right. The assignments on the learning contract, which are sort of those first, the student identifies like 5 or 6 assignments for each learning contract. And those are really the broad goals that the student is identifying for that field period. So these are the major things I want to think about learning, and the rest of the document falls out from there. So examples might be, I really want to learn how to facilitate a group. This field period, that's my goal. Learning about funding sources, learning about evidence-based practices, community assessment. So then how do we translate that into more measurable goals and objectives that are achievable in the time frame that we're looking at? Why don't we take a 5-minute break, let you get up, stretch, go get more food, and we'll come back and continue with this, okay? So just 5 minutes, okay, so I can make sure to get you out on time. All right, so we've developed, and I won't go through all these slides, we've developed some examples for you to use as a resource for sample learning contract implementation plans. So the language around the practice behaviors is really pretty much taken verbatim from CSWE policy. So it's a little jargony, right? It's a little bit academic, can be hard to sometimes really apply, take some thinking. So we've put some examples together and how to make this a little bit more real. So how to translate it into, into the life of organizations. So just a few of the examples we'll talk about. And again, there's some included in the slides that you have as a resource. Please always, though, if you're stuck, feel free to discuss this with the field faculty advisor because they're such a great resource, and they are the ones that came up with these samples. So, okay, so an example for competency area demonstrating ethical and professional behavior. The behavior says, so this is a CSWE language, make ethical decisions by applying the standards of the NISW Code of Ethics, relevant law and regulations, models for ethical decision-making, ethical conduct of research, and additional codes of ethics as appropriate to context. So something that a student could write as a goal, as an implementation plan, was they could take a look at several different models of ethical decision-making. That's something actually they review in the classroom. So taking one of those models that they've learned about and then applying it to a case scenario that they're working on in field. And then they can discuss that with you in supervision. That absolutely meets the need. Thinking about using reflection and self-regulations to manage values and professionalism in practice situations. Something that they could work on is to develop a self-care plan and self-regulation techniques to help manage challenging professional interactions. I just want to ask you as well to really reiterate, we really talk a great deal with our students about self-care. It's something very important, and what that means for them and how to think about self-care as a student and then as a professional. any chance that you have to reinforce that would be great, because, they're really balancing a lot of things, as are all of we, right? But, balancing their work in the classroom, the new learning that's coming in field, the challenges of being a graduate student, their family lives, working. It's a lot. It's a lot. And there's a lot of stress. So helping them to think about self-care intentionally now, I think, is critical. I know when I was a student, when I was early in practice, I didn't understand things like secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, just didn't know what it was, really. And I think helping students to understand the complexity of some of the things that come up in practice for us as social workers is super important, because what I find they go back to, and what I've seen, in my professional work, is feeling incompetent, or they get maybe deterred from the profession because they're just tired and they don't understand what's happening. So I think that's just really critical. We've been trying to do more of it as a school, but really reinforcing that with them. Because, what I'll hear a lot is, I don't have time for that. And I'm like, well, we need to think about it. And it doesn't mean taking a bubble bath 3 times a week, or, eating chocolate, or I could, but, maybe it's setting a boundary and saying no to something, or, setting some intentional time in your schedule to make sure you can exercise, or, so really helping them to think about what that means. So it's not just a concept, I think is just so important. So competency area 4, which is our research competency, tends to be difficult for students and for organizations, I think, because I think sometimes organizations will think, well, we don't do research here, and students will think, well, they don't do research in my organization. How do I apply this? Well, it can be something as simple as taking a few articles and looking at them and understanding how that literature and research can inform or improve the practice that's going on in an organization. What does it tell you? What does it tell the student? What recommendations might be made in terms of service delivery based on the literature review that they've done, and talking about that with you. So helping them to really think about that, looking at evidence-based practice. So what models can I review that may be applicable to the population in my field placement organization? They can present these findings to you. We've had students do presentations to communities, to boards, to administration of organizations, and really have been able to make some powerful change because they have, the time and capacity to put this information together, whereas we may be too busy to be thinking about all of these things. So that's an example of how we can apply the research competency, hopefully in a not very painful manner. Policy tends to be another area that seems to be tricky. Now, for students who are in community practice, it's less so, but having the student really look at, everyone has policies that determine the work that you do, what you're able to do in organizations, whether they be, organizational policy, federal, community, state, local, funding. So really having the student take a look at, okay, so what are 2 policies that really influence the work that's going on in this organization, and what does that mean? How does it influence our clients, our consumers? So those are some examples of how they can take a look at policy. I won't go through all of these, but again, they're in your handouts. And also, I'll just ask you to pay attention to, so for our engagement, assessment, intervention, and evaluation, to pay attention to the fact that we're asking that to occur at all of those levels, so from individual all the way up. If you need more examples, please feel free to let us know. We have lots of them. But I know that it can be tricky to help students think about these things, and I hope that they're engaging you in the conversation. I mean, the learning contract is their responsibility, but we really want this. I mean, it's a great thing to talk about in supervision. We don't want them setting up all these goals about all these great things that they're going to do without asking you about it, because we want it to be feasible. And then you kind of know what they're working on. You can be checking back periodically. What kind of progress are you making? And just thinking as the days and the weeks go by, have you had the opportunity to get into that group, or did you go to that community meeting, and making sure that they've really taken the initiative in getting the experiences that they want and are appropriate. And again, the leadership competency, this is something that's really important to us. We want all of our students to be developing their leadership skills. So that can look pretty broadly in terms of what they're doing in organizations, and they can get very creative here. So it's a very important area. The process for our learning contracts. So just an overview again, the students should be thinking about and identifying their goals. We're hoping that they're working with you to really think about those broad assignments that will guide the rest of the learning contract and their work throughout the semester. The students then working to translate some of that information into specific objectives. It should be used as a guide and a reference to measure how they're progressing and the skills that they're developing. And then you and the student, as most of you know, I'm sure, and have done, are going to evaluate progress at the end of each field period in the learning contract document. So there's a mutual evaluation, and there's a qualitative summary that's in a narrative, and then the numerical ratings as well. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about ratings, because this, I think, can be difficult. Does anyone struggle with this piece, giving students ratings? Yeah. Well, we're going to be working on, I understand that. We're actually working this summer we're going to be working again on our learning contracts, and that may be something that we consider. So, I think students want to be great. They want to be great. You want to be supportive. We also have students that really dramatically underrate themselves in terms of what they're doing. But I really want to encourage you to please, provide the most accurate and constructive feedback that you can. As difficult as it may be, it really will support the student, in learning and progressing. So, and I would think, I would hope that just as when you're doing performance evaluations, right, for employees, you never want that to be a surprise. Like during the annual performance evaluation, it's like, what do you mean I'm doing horribly? That you're talking about these things so that if there are ratings that perhaps, need some attention, in some areas that need attention, the student is aware of that before they're seeing this final document come in. So those conversations I think are really important. So what we're expecting, and this is something I think that we as a school need to clarify. All right, so what we consider a modal rating for emerging competence is a 0 to 2. And students are expected, so we have our generalist year and our specialized year, so these two different levels of the curriculum. We really need to be looking at competence separately within those two domains. So I think we pulled some data this year we always pull field data every year and look at it in aggregate form in terms of how our students are doing in each area of competency. And this year, some of our performance ratings for our students were lower than what we typically see. And we have some theories, one of which I think that we need to be helping organizations think about how to provide students with well-rounded opportunities, in every area that they need to have exposure to, but then also providing some clarification in terms of these ratings and what we're expecting. So for a student who is in the first year, in the generalist year of the curriculum, we are looking by the end of that second field course, we are looking for them to be competent at the generalist level. So what you would be expecting for a first year graduate student of social work. I think perhaps there may be some confusion, and we don't want those students assessed against what would be expected for professional social workers. And I think that's easy to do, So really thinking about, for a first year graduate student of social work, where are you within these competencies and how are you doing? And not thinking about it in terms of what you might expect for an employee or a colleague. So there's the generalist courses and then the specialized courses. So for students who, as in their first semester of the program, we don't expect them to be competent. If they're competent, if they're getting 4s across the board first semester of field, it's like, well, either you're working on the wrong things, right? You need tougher goals. There should be emerging competence there because they are developing their skills at the generalist level. And we're trying to do some education with them too, because does anyone have students kind of argue with them about ratings? Does that come up? And students, we encourage our students to be advocates, right? You be advocates, and to have these discussions. We see that with grades. We have a grade grievance process because that's their right. So they certainly have the ability to have a discussion, but what we're trying to help them understand as well as our field community in general is there is a process here, right? So competence develops over time. So towards the end of the first year of the generalist curriculum, then we're looking for competence. So we're looking for 3s and 4s here because they should be meeting the objectives of what's outlined in the learning contract at that generalist level. When they go into the advanced or specialist courses, again, the process somewhat starts over in terms of the assessment because now they're developing new skills at a different level, at the specialist level. So there are the competencies always stay the same, but those behaviors that are outlined in your handout there and then also in the learning contract, those are different at the specialist level. We're asking them to do more and different things. So again, we're not expecting them to be, super competent as they begin that process. You can always tell on the learning contracts, it will say generalist or specialized on the document. And if you're like, I don't know what course my student is in, just ask the field advisor and we'll let you know. We can provide some clarification because it's a lot to take in. But I want to make sure that we're assessing our students as students, accurately, should be accurately, but as students and not as professionals. When they're entering their last course, then they should be pretty ready for professional practice because they will be out in practice. But again, they are still students and they are developing their skills continually throughout the program. So that feedback is so important because we always weigh in. The field faculty we issue the grades for our field courses. Everything with the exception of our field seminar is graded pass-fail. So we're looking for the students to make progress, but we can only weigh in so much in terms of their progress in field because we're not there on the day-to-day. You're there in the day-to-day. So that's why we call you instructors, because we're relying on you to be the instructor of the course. Do you have questions about that? Does that make sense? Okay. And again, this can be a continuous conversation. We are here to have these discussions with you, so I don't want you to leave and try and have to remember all of this, but just in thinking about, as you're doing the assessments, really looking at the students as learners and providing that really constructive yet accurate feedback about their progress. And this basically just reiterates everything I just said. So just the appropriate expectations for graduate social work students, okay, at the 2 different levels. The narrative summary, we did some pretty substantial revisions to our learning contracts about 2 years ago to come in line with CSWE and then with the new practice behaviors, and then also to eliminate some of the redundancy. I hope those of you that have been doing this for a while, you will find this this round of documents or have found it a little bit more user-friendly. Again, we're going to be having some work groups over the summer to take a look at what the next iteration of the learning contract will look like. Our school is in the process of reaccreditation. We actually have worked all last semester, well, actually for probably about a year before we submitted our documents in December. We'll have our site visit in the spring. So that's been a big focus of our time and attention recently, but we're hoping this summer, again, to really look at the learning contracts and think about how can we make these a little bit more user-friendly and meaningful. I want them to be meaningful to the students. So we'll be taking a look at that, and we may be asking you for your feedback as well. So that narrative piece, there's just one narrative. You do one, the student does one. That's at the end of the document. So again, I just encourage you, we tried to condense this. Before there was like a section after every competency, and it was just a lot. So really just taking a time to really provide some specific feedback here in narrative form in terms of their professional development, what they're doing really well, and the areas for continued growth. You know, what do you hope that they'll focus on during the next field period? I think it's really helpful for us to see. It's helpful for the students to see. And we ask them the same questions. So I hope that you'll be able to use the narrative summary to really provide more than the numbers. The numbers are important in the ratings, but this narrative piece is really critical as well. Anyone have questions about the narrative?
I just wanted to add that as a field advisor, I really rely on the field instructor's narration.
Let Angie give you the, yeah.
As a field advisor, it's really quite informative to me to read your narration at the end of the document. It gives me some detail of the student's performance in field in a way that the ratings and the other portions of the contract don't give me. So thank you. It's very helpful to us.
I think too it's a good place to, there's some things won't be picked up in the learning contract, but perhaps if a student is struggling, if they're doing something like coming late continually, or they're struggling in areas with some professional skills where there's not an opportunity to really address that in the learning contract, this is a great place to talk about that, because that's stuff that we want to be aware of, and the student needs to recognize then that then it needs to be addressed, and hopefully that would have come up in conversation, but I think that this is a great avenue to really provide your feedback, and as Beth said, it's so meaningful to us in understanding how the student is doing sort of from a more global context. All right, quick overview of roles. So the student's always number one. They're number one priority. All of our students have field instructors. Not all students have task supervisors. It depends. Some students have both, a task supervisor and a field instructor. It just depends on the setup of the organization. So some of the students will not ever have a task supervisor. Some students will always have one. And then the field faculty advisor is here at the Mandel School. So what we're asking, we've talked a lot about what we're asking you to do, what we ask the student to do, so you know. We want them coming prepared for their weekly meetings with you. We want them to not be relying on you to come up with agenda items for discussion, but to be prepared for their meetings and the things that they would like to talk about and address. So they should really be thinking about an agenda for their meetings with you. If they have not been doing that, please feel free to ask them to, because you're busy and we want there to be a good use of time. To work with you, so actively be engaging you in the process of the learning contract. So this does not mean a panicky phone call one day before the learning contract is due, saying I need you to do this, this, and this. It should be a discussion. We want them to be talking with you about their goals. So if they're not bringing this to you, I think it's helpful if you can say, oh, how's the learning contract coming, and engaging them in that discussion. They should be providing you with ample notice regarding due dates for their documents. None of our due dates are a surprise. They are well in advance. At the beginning of the semester, the students are provided with this information. We do not expect them to be surprising you with anything. And if you are surprised, please feel free to connect with us and let us know, because, what do they say? Your lack of planning should not become my crisis. I mean, so those are things that we need to know about and can work with you around, but they have ample notice on when the evaluations need to be turned in, and all of the required due dates are laid out way in advance. That's never a surprise. We also expect them to really be demonstrating professional behavior. We have a code of conduct for our students. I mean, they're expected to follow the NSW code of conduct, but we also have a professional code of conduct, which means presenting with professional behavior at all times and addressing issues and concerns in a professional manner. So that's an expectation for all students. And to be open to constructive feedback and engaged in learning. So really listening to your feedback, take advantage of that teaching role. I think for some students that's easier than others, but that should be something that they are open to from you as their field instructor. Their requirements, so again, everything is outlined either in their course syllabus or learning management platforms. We have different platforms for our online and on-campus programs now, which I won't get into because it gets very confusing, but they have everything is outlined within their course documents and information. They are required to complete their field hours for each course. They need to complete their required professional development hours. They have the timesheets that they need to submit monthly. That's how we know that they're completing the requirements. They need to have a field conference that should be proactively arranged with our field faculty and with you. So again, it shouldn't be my field advisor wants to come out tomorrow morning. They should be collaboratively coming up with a time that works for everyone. And then completing the learning contract and the evaluation. We talked a bit about professional development opportunities. Task supervisors are pretty much, your role really mirrors that of the field instructor with a few exceptions. One is a task supervisor is not responsible for providing that weekly supervision. That's, we ask the field instructor to be in charge of sort of the formal supervision piece, because the role of the field instructor is really to formally integrate the professional values of social work. So some task supervisors may be social workers, but some task supervisors are not. They are trained in other professions, which is really valuable, but we need that social work perspective all of the time. So other than that, and then we ask field instructors to weigh in task supervisors to weigh in on the learning contract and to participate in the development, but you do not, as a task supervisor, have to complete the evaluation component of the learning contract. Field instructors, our requirement, a CSWE requirement actually, is that the field instructor has to have a master's degree in social work with 2 years post-master's experience. Licensure is preferred, but it is not a requirement. That's confusing at times. So, but the master's degree, the 2 years post-master's experience is a requirement, but that does not apply to task supervision. We really consider you an important, critical aspect of the student's educational team and a really important resource in their learning and professional development. So I encourage you to really think about yourself in that teaching role, because that's how we think of you. So, your role obviously is very practice focused, but we really rely on you to be a teacher too. One piece, and this may vary, students' experiences will be different. If they're already employees of an agency that they're doing field in, they may not need as much of this, but really providing students as they begin experiences, if they're coming in from the outside, in addition to kind of the standard orientation to the agency or the organization, really talking with them about agency culture, because that's hard to pick up on. There's a lot of nuances, and students don't have the same level of experience that we do in sort of being able to tune into some of these things. But I know I've seen a lot of folks make some mistakes in not understanding the culture of the organization. So helping them to understand that and how that internal culture really guides practice, what it means, and helping them tune into some of this. This can be particularly, is anyone working with an international student right now? Wonderful. So if you have opportunities to work with our international students, I would really encourage you to do so, because they bring such a tremendous amount of value. But things like culture and agency practice, it can be really, there is another level, I think, of support that our international students need that's really important. I always tell them that they are like my heroes, because they are not students who are relocating to begin our program. They're not able to come over until they have about a month before classes start. So they have to move here, secure their housing, get everything settled with living and acclimating, and then we're piling the school on top of it, and then we're piling field on top of it, and it's just a tremendous transition. So I just am amazed at how well that they do and how brave that they are. I don't know that I would be that brave. So, but just paying attention to some of those nuances. I think sometimes you forget what you know. You forget what you know, and what just is sort of second nature to you isn't to the students. So helping them with that piece. Providing them with opportunities to shadow and observe, but we really expect our students, in general, to be involved in more than shadowing, so supervised practice within a couple weeks. So we don't want students, 4, 6, 8 weeks, I'm shadowing. Now that can be different levels of experience, and you, of course, if they're not ready, that's another discussion. But we don't want them, they may be saying they're not ready, but we want them to be doing actual activities pretty quickly, because the program goes by fast and they don't have a lot of time. So some of that is your judgment and theirs, but we don't want students shadowing experiences for an extended amount of time. Does anyone have questions about that, or no? Okay, all right. Just a little piece about safety. Again, it really depends on the student and their circumstance. If they've been in an organization as an employee, they're probably very familiar with safety protocols, procedures, and all of that. If they have not, we provide them with some basic safety information in terms of social work practice when they come in at orientation. But I always like to ask folks not to assume that students have all of the safety information that they need, especially if they're doing community work, home visiting. So really taking the time to think about the safety protocols and procedures, what you do if this happens, because we can't provide them with all of that, because all of your agency protocols are different. So just not assuming that they understand how to respond, perhaps if a client were to become aggressive or hostile. What's the agency procedure, but then what are some skills that you can use if a client begins to escalate in front of you? How do you respond? What's the expectation? In terms of community work, what students may need to know when going into different areas of the community, of the country that they may not be familiar with. That's all really important. A lot of things that often come up for students is concerns about or questions about transporting clients, home visiting, exposure to different home conditions. What do I do if I go into a home and there's bed bugs, or there are safety concerns within the home, and how to respond to aggressive clients? So these are things that come up pretty consistently, and the more that you can do to help them understand how to respond is very helpful. One thing about observation and practice. So we really, and this is actually something that we only began to encourage recently, but I'm really strongly encouraging it now. Please find the opportunity, if you are not, to observe your student in practice. It's really important to the feedback that you are able to give to see what they are doing, and to be able to provide quick and helpful feedback and have a discussion about that. You know, they can tell you how they think that they're doing, and that may be accurate, it may not be, but you being able to see, okay, so I observed you do this presentation, or I observed you in this assessment. These are the things I think you did really well, specific information. Here are some things I think we should work on for next time. And students don't want to be observed. We don't want to be observed, right? But it's really, really important to see what they're doing. So I would ask you, if you haven't had the opportunity yet, to find some experiences this semester to really observe your student in practice. I think it will go a very long way for you and for them. And then the supervision piece. You know, we, again, recognize the tremendous pressure that agencies are under and all of the competing demands on your time. Totally understand that. But that dedicated time for supervision is critical to the student's learning. It is absolutely critical time for them to be able to really process what's happening and move forward. So that piece is essential to your role, probably the most important piece. Yeah.
Is that even if they only have 10 hours a week of field placement time?
Yeah. We ask for weekly contact with the field instructor. Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's what we ask for. Again, understanding that that's not always feasible. So I think what's most important is that there is a dedicated time, but we understand that that hour may not be possible all of the time. So we would just ask, though, that there be, perhaps if you can't see a student for a week, then the next week you can add some additional time. Or if you have multiple students, if you're doing some meetings with students together, that is okay. But we also ask you to make sure that there's some individual time set aside, because what we find is that students I think there is some conversation that needs to occur on a one-to-one basis that they're not as forthcoming with, perhaps if they're in a group. So we want to try and find ways to make this manageable. So
Not so much of my time, but of the students, because 10 hours seems simple,
Yeah.
but I'm finding it so short.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you for your question. Anyone else have any questions about that? Okay, we're almost done. So just a little piece on supervision, right? So those of you that are, maybe more in clinical practice or use reflective supervision, one thing I just want to highlight is I think it can become with employees, with staff members as well, right? There's so much to go over all the time, especially in social work. There's always something happening, right? So the administrative aspects of this needs to be done, and this paperwork, and this, and the deadline, but really that's a part of it. We understand it has to happen. Students need to learn paperwork, and they need to learn deadlines, and they need to learn all of that to do their jobs, right? But also preserving that time for the teaching piece. So because that's really essential. So setting aside some time to really talk about what they're doing in the classroom, the learning contract. And okay, so now we talked about the assessments that you completed for all of these clients, right? But let's talk about, how did that session go? And wow, this client has a lot of challenging issues. How did that feel for you? So setting aside the time for the reflection is really important as well. So just ask you to try and balance some of that in your weekly meetings with them. Does anyone have any strategies that you use to try and either preserve the time with the student every week, or to think about how to balance out all of that administrative stuff with your teaching role? Does anyone have anything that works really well? Does anyone, go ahead.
What I like to do is kind of come up with a list at the beginning of the semester and kind of look at, what do I want to start with? Where do I want my student to be at the end of the semester? And then kind of pick a couple topics to really focus on each week, because then it seems less overwhelming than trying to do everything at once. And so really focusing on that and getting her to the end of the semester and building her skills as we go.
That's great. That's wonderful. I think we had one more. Haley up here. Oh, no, sorry.
I usually either make it in the morning or in the afternoon, like at the beginning or the end of the day, because then you don't have to, there's not really much that can get in the way of that. And or also just keeping it at the same time every single week before or after a meeting or something.
Yeah.
That we do.
Also, we do a lot of group treatment, so we do a lot of co-leading, and of course, if there's a break, we, talk about what happened, how they felt, and then with the individual supervisory session, I have a form where the student actually takes a more active role of looking at what they're doing, and then we talk about it, and they write, a little bit of the summary, and then, I can add an additional comment, but it helps them take on more responsibility in that session to come up with what they want, what we discussed, what they learned, what they might want to do something different to improve the situation.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Does anyone else have any strategies? Okay. And, again, we recognize that it can be difficult to balance all of this, but I think having that set aside time is really important. And also, having the student share in responsibility, I think is a great piece to, the burden shouldn't fall completely on you. It's really the student should be the driving force. Just a little bit about adult learning, what we know, and again, this is adapted from Marian Bogo's wonderful work, but, new learning really impacts self-confidence in adults and identity and all kinds of things. So it really can stir up a lot in good ways and in, some challenging ways for students. So students very quickly begin to make decisions internally about their competence or incompetence. This is starting to happen. So really, what is most helpful in your guidance and providing them with support and empowerment to help them understand, again, you're learning, you don't have to be perfect, but you can do this. You absolutely can do this. And that we are here, that you are there to help them get there. But it's a process. So giving that encouragement to students can go such a long way. See, so many students they're so incredibly hard on themselves. They just want to do well. Our program academically is extremely rigorous. It's very challenging, and they can become deflated. And sometimes all it takes is a little, you're right. So maybe this didn't go so well, but we're going to try again, and we're going to keep trying until you get there. And that supportive guidance I'm telling you, it can really make a huge difference for a student. And I think, just anecdotally from my experience, some of the greatest, risks for our students comes at the beginning, when they're trying to figure out, how do I handle all of this at once? I have all these new things in the classroom, and I don't know what I'm doing in field, and now I don't have any time for my family or to do laundry because I'm constantly, working on all of this stuff. And it becomes very unwieldy for them. So just helping them to understand, this will get easier, it will get better, you will survive, that initial transition period. I always tell them, once you figure out kind of how to balance work, life, school, sort of. And I said, it's like walking a tightrope. Some weeks you're just going to fall off one side. If somebody gets sick, you have a huge paper due, a client blows up at you, you're going to start to tip over. But you just have to right yourself and keep going forward. And it will get easier. But your support really goes a long way. But just sort of keep in mind this. Think about learning new things, right? It's like, it really is challenging as adults. Sometimes we're not so good at it. We think we have things figured out, and then all of a sudden, all of these new concepts, and it sort of changes who you are, your identity. Just a little tiny piece about neuroscience. So, when students become dysregulated, so say they have a challenging interaction with you, they have a challenging interaction with a client, something is upsetting. This really starts to impact what's happening in the brain. It impacts their ability to focus and pay attention to you or to what's going on around them, and to retain. So if they're extremely dysregulated, they're not going to be able to retain a whole lot. And this dysregulation really impacts their ability to learn. So students really need support and strategies in being able to manage their reactions and emotions. I think too, for some of our students who come in that don't have a background in social work, it can be tough because they come in, you have your thoughts about what social work is and what it's going to be like. And then you go into an agency and maybe that's not what you thought. And you start thinking about, well, maybe this is me. Maybe I just can't do this, or this isn't what I thought. And they can become, it's very anxiety provoking. It can be emotional. We are going to offer, I'm going to do a plug now, for our annual Field Instructor Appreciation event in June. We're doing a piece on trauma-informed field supervision. So really supporting our field community in understanding how emotion and regulation play into our students' experiences, and also how the experiences of our students play into how they're able to do in field. So we will talk a lot about lots of things related to the ACE study and the data that helps us to understand just how many people and students have pieces of their background that may influence what's going on in field. So a lot of that starts to kick up too. So really thinking about that regulation and awareness piece and helping students to understand why they may be feeling the way they are, and not dipping into clinical practice. Your role here is certainly not as practitioner, as educator, but how self-care plays into that, how these experiences are difficult for us all as humans, So I hope you'll all be able to attend that. We'll also do a live stream for that event. Just in what we found works the best in terms of the supervisory process is practice, practice, practice some more for the student experiences, the observation from you, timely feedback, ability to reflect and discuss. That's what we know to work. That's what the literature tells us works the best. So finding opportunities to observe, reflect, discuss, being able to, I'm just going to skip, being able to translate your feedback, so making the implicit explicit. So really being able to provide reflection based on what you saw. So I saw you did this, and this translates into this, how it ties into social work values and ethics, and then specific things, specific behaviors, skills, characteristics. That's a lot more meaningful to students in terms of feedback, and that's then grounded in your own observation. So they start to understand the rationale for why you're saying what you're saying better, and it helps them to learn. So just thinking about that, but really providing accurate yet supportive feedback is important to learning. This is just a review of all of the things that we've talked about in terms of what you're doing for the program every semester, so you'll have that. The field faculty advisor is always your primary point of contact. We do not expect you to be figuring out student issues on your own or trying to navigate things. If you are experiencing challenges with a student, please let us know. Please let us know. Too often, I think we find out about things much later than we hoped. We see very well-meaning field instructors just trying to make it work. But that's what we're there for. We're there to help and to help pick through some of these issues and to solve problems. So please, you are not alone. We are here to help you. Students may request accommodations through our Office of Disability Resources if they have specific learning needs that may translate into accommodations. So this would be similar to an IEP for a school-age child. They can request accommodations, but it has to be done through the Office of Disability Resources. Sometimes it does translate into field, but the student would be responsible for talking to you about that and to their field advisor, and we would be able to provide you with support in figuring out what does this mean. If a student has accommodation, how does it apply to field work? All right, a little bit about IPT. Just some tips for success. Use us as a resource. We have our field instructor page on the website that has all of our different manuals and documents and all kinds of things on it. hopefully you'll be able to have, again, realistic expectations for the students. Teach and be willing to learn. I think they teach us so much, they really do. So I hope that you're getting back as much as you're giving to them. Being able to balance flexibility, but providing the structure as well. And also to try and advocate for yourselves in your role as field instructor within your own organization. I mean, there's a benefit to you supervising students in your organization. Hopefully they're helping the organization, but it's a time commitment, right? You're investing resources. So hopefully being able to get some top level support for, I have to spend an hour a week or more with this student. Maybe my productivity should be a little bit less, or maybe this responsibility can go to someone else. And that may or may not be feasible, but I think having the support of the organization is tremendously helpful. So I would just encourage you to toot your own horn about the work that you're doing with the students. All right, there is our website and the information about our Save the Date. We'll be getting more information to you about that event very soon. We hope that you'll all be able to be here. There'll be CEUs, there'll be a lunch, and again, we'll have live stream for those of you that aren't able to be here in person. I just want to thank you. I made it 3 o'clock on the dot. I want to thank you all so much.